I want to talk to you all about Pierre-Emile Højbjerg snubbing Newcastle United. Newcastle United's first rejection under Jaisler, and how I feel this is, for use of better words, we'll quote Donald Trump, fake news. And what I really feel is, most of all, that this transfer was put forward in the media, and it's the first transfer I felt like we'd highlighted a target without actually making moves in the market, and how that doesn't seem to be the model that we've been following and operating this season. If you're new around here, I'm Adam, this is Two for Joy. Get down there, like, hype, subscribe. We'll go through all of it. Thank you to everybody for commenting, for watching, and for getting involved. And otherwise, let's get into it. So where I want to start off with is the media narrative around Højbjerg, and how for the first time this summer we saw Keith Downie, we saw Craig Hope, Luke Edwards, Lee Ryder, everybody report almost within the same 5 minutes that Højbjerg had become a target for Newcastle United. And then a day later, the links for Palhinha, and it was Palhinha and Højbjerg, and Newcastle couldn't decide who they wanted to go for as the replacement or to fit the mould of this midfield. Probably not a replacement, to fit the mould of this midfield. But what I found baffling with this is that every transfer target we'd had so far this summer under Ross Wilson, leading up to the signing of Matthias Jaisler, is we've not really known about the targets until almost the deal is done. Even Matthias Jaisler coming in as manager, with it being reported that Eddie Howe had made the club aware 2 weeks previous that he wanted to go, the news wasn't put out into the mainstream media until the deal with Matthias Jaisler was pretty much signed and sealed. He knew he was coming. Al Ahly knew that they were accepting a £9 million payout. And what I would say is there was protest from the Al Ahly supporters before Newcastle even knew that the deal was, or before Newcastle mainstream media knew that the deal was going to be signed and sealed. The Al Ahly supporters were protesting that they didn't want their manager to leave, not knowing where he was going. And I just find it hard to believe that Newcastle have done relatively good business, relatively well under the radar this summer. And I've spoken to another couple of Newcastle YouTubers about this, and maybe it is the fact that Newcastle didn't feel Højbjerg was as big a profile, or that there would be as many teams in for him this summer as other targets. Or maybe it's the case that Newcastle were putting this out as a projected smokescreen, which is what I feel it is. I feel I wouldn't understand Newcastle doing the business they've done with Toure, with Bamba, with Stur, with both the goalkeepers, João and Hornacek, going relatively under the radar until the deal is almost confirmed. I find it very hard to believe that then we would go out and project our midfield targets into the media without knowing 99% that these players are coming through the door. And it leaves me in a position to believe that maybe Newcastle have put this out as a smokescreen. I don't believe this rejection FC. The way we've operated and the way we brought players in makes me believe that this narrative is been and gone. And most of all, the biggest talking point is actually where I feel Newcastle will go next in the market. And I think the next signing to come in will really be the projection of how much ambition there is at the club and the direction we're expecting to head in. It's like how quickly we're expecting Gijsler to be able to develop and project not where we're going to finish, but the stepping stones for how quickly the club moves forward. I genuinely feel if we go into this market and we bring in an experienced DM for relatively low value in the way that we were projected to do Højbjerg, and then follow with big money or bigger money in the way that we looked at Manzambi, on somebody who can play a 10 role and be creative and go forward and offer us something very different to the Newcastle structure under Eddie Howe. I believe there's big ambition here. I believe that if Newcastle go out and we spend relatively, I won't say, let's say level fees across 3 signings and bring in a solid developable midfielder with a solid fullback who can play both sides and possibly a right winger, Newcastle are looking to steady the ship and kind of raise the floor across the whole of this squad. But what I genuinely believe is the next signing will be the one that highlights the ambition, highlights the direction that Newcastle are willing or wanting to go in. And I do feel there needs to be experience brought in. I do feel there needs to be a profile to the next signing, whether that's an experienced leader who can bring some steady value to this midfield, set standards across the team, set training standards, and kind of take this club by the scruff of the neck. That will set a precedent. And if not, if we are going to carry on the projection of potential and youth players, if it becomes a player that is offering as a 10, it suggests to me that Newcastle are going to push forward with this front-footed nature of trying to outscore or play attacking football and be front-footed as the staple to the way we move forward. It's a really interesting point. It's an interesting topic. Like I say, I'd like you guys to let me know in the comments what you think as to whether I wasn't blown away with the idea of Højbjerg coming in, but I also didn't mind it bringing in someone of experience with a steady background that's played at the highest level to kind of shore up this midfield and give it some leadership. Where the direction goes from here, I feel, is down to Gijsler and Ross Wilson and coming to an agreed vision for the club. And whether this happens now, which I know a lot of people feel like we need to get players through the door, or whether it happens at the start of the season and Gijsler actually wants to hold on to some of this money and say we can do business, but I actually want to see what I've got at a competitive level after the first 1 or 2 games of the season, where we really test to see what gaps are in the squad and what holes really need filling, and the money to be prioritised towards not what we believe but what we can actually see, is a really interesting point. Like I say, let me know in the comments. I think personally, I believe Højbjerg and Palhinha could be a smokescreen for Newcastle actually heading in a different direction completely. Like, hype, subscribe. It's only a short one today, guys. And thank you to everybody for getting involved and all the subs. We're growing quicker than I ever thought we would. And hopefully, guys, I will see you in the next one.